Kenya's Sam Soko is a prominent figure in the recent rise of African documentary. Even if you haven't seen his films, this conversation is worth a listen. I'm Tom Powers, and this is Pure Nonfiction. Sam Soko made his directing debut at the Sundance Film Festival in 2020 with the documentary Softie, about an idealistic politician in Kenya. 2 years later, at the Toronto International Film Festival, I hosted Sam for a film he co-directed called Free Money. It's about an American NGO that gives universal basic income to residents of a Kenyan village as an experiment. Both films were a hit with international audiences, and more important for Sam, made a deep impact in Kenya. His breakthroughs gave him a unique experience that he applied to producing the work of other African directors. One of those films is Matabele Land, that premiered in March at the CPH Docs Festival in Copenhagen. I'll say more about it later. We recorded this interview in front of a live audience at CPH Docs. We discussed the rise of African documentary in the past decade and why that success is now in danger. I started by asking Sam how he got started.
My background is in theater. I studied theater in college. I loved working in the theater. And then a friend of mine who was trying to finish a short documentary had been stuck for so long to try to figure it out. And they were like, this guy might understand what we're struggling with. And I got to watch what they did, and I was like, this makes no sense, and helped them work it out, and I never left. Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit more about like what you saw as the potential of documentary filmmaking and what drew you into it?
I don't know if this will make sense. It's like there's an honesty with or reality. There's something that is expressed in people's stories that they themselves are struggling to express. And with a camera and time, this expression kind of comes through. And that's something I find very appealing to learn from. And not only for me, it's like there's a realization that a lot of people are trying to learn, to understand, to engage. And in the broader sense, it's what breeds a lot of fear, a lot of shame, lack of understanding. And what the camera does is provide that opportunity. And in the space that we come from, in the African continent, in Kenya, there's very little understanding because it's not something we have been allowed to do. And that understanding has always been framed by other people. And like we've been told, this is how you say, this is what you say, this is how you write, this is all these things, and even this is how you talk. And what documentary provided was an opportunity to express and kind of give an opportunity for people to be who they are, and allow others and other African people to watch this and have an opportunity to reflect and create an opportunity to engage. And that's something I totally love about documentary, that opportunity, that chance. That's not anybody else's. It's just someone who gives you that space. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we get a little glimpse from that trailer of Softie that you're following the evolution of him becoming a politician and also having to navigate that with his family life and make risk calculations. And the film compresses like 10 years of time. So when did you begin on that film, and what did you learn along the way about making a film?
So I began making that film thinking it's just gonna take me 2 weeks. So I learned that patience patience can take you a long way. But the thing I learned is that people evolve, and in that evolution, they're genuinely trying to ask themselves, what do they want? What are they trying to achieve? And in this case, it was a man who genuinely wants a better life for his family, and wants a better life for his kids, and wants a better life for his country. But this country had given so little back, and he was just like trying to ask why. Like, how did we end here? Why are people asking me, where do I come from? And filming over that period of time helped connect the dots from like, this is the consequence of colonialism in the decisions we make as Africans, in the leaders we pick. But that the decisions we pick are not only contained as a consequence of colonialism, but also as a consequence of the leaders that we are exposed to and the choices these leaders make. And the sum total of it, and I don't know if some of you were aware, in the last year in around June, there were these massive youth protests in Kenya, and everybody was shocked. Where the hell did they come from? These young people. And for us, like for me, it was very curious because, you know, the film had been out for like 4 years, and seeing a lot of these young people making short TikTok videos about like quotes from the film and all these other things from the film, and they're like, yeah, we're tired of these idiots. What the hell do they know? And congregating that, it was like there's a greater understanding now with the information they were getting, and a greater understanding that we are some consequence of the decisions we make, that are like, this is the issues that colonialism caused, but this is what our politicians are doing. But we can stand up and do something about it. We can question this. And yeah, like that for me has been creating these connections that are large on the macro level, but can be understood on a very individual level. Yeah.
You know, in the 20 years that I've been programming the Toronto Film Festival, I've seen an evolution. I would say 20 years ago when I started, if we were getting stories about Africa, they were often being produced from the global north, European filmmakers, North American filmmakers. And there's been a distinct change. I guess I have a hard time, you know, putting dates on it, but, you know, it's in the last 10 years. And I think, you know, Softie was part of that. I mean, it's only 5 years ago, but, you know, there was part of a recognition of, you know, films that were hitting the international film festival circuit, and, you know, expressing, you know, I think a new generation of filmmakers telling their own stories. I wonder, you know, how you've experienced that, you know, what you've seen of your generation telling their own stories. And I mean, we'll talk about two things. We'll talk about getting them out to the rest of the world, but then also the impact, as you've already alluded to with Softie, of having those stories shared in your own country.
So I will say the process of making the film, because again, in making this whole journey, I had no idea there is a world outside that cares about what I was making. So primarily, my primary audience was these people that I engage with every day. And
I'm curious, did you have any touch points? Like, was there another film that you had in mind, or another piece of media, fiction film or YouTube video that you thought like, oh, what I'm doing is kind of like this?
No, it's only when I went to IDFA in 2016, because there's a friend of mine who really was like, you gotta go to this film festival, you gotta go to this festival. That's when I met a bunch of people, and you know, you meet someone who's like, oh, I've been making a film for how long? Just like, mine has been 12 years. And I'm like, wait, what? 12 years? and it was like this meeting of community that I did not know existed. And again, a meeting of minds of like, we're trying to do something about what's happening in our spaces and in our world. But at the same time, it's kind of came together that we're all operating from a different baseline.
Oh.
Like I said, I came from theater, but the same school I went with taught film, and the people who were learning film never touched a camera. That's not a thing they ever had. And coming to this space, even now, there is a kind of expectation as though we are kind of on the same level, and we are not.
Yeah.
The stories we are trying to tell and the people we are trying to tell these stories to, they don't feel deserving of stories of themselves. They always, again, like you're alluding to, they're used to being shown a certain type of image. We're not allowed to just be basic characters. We either have to be the hero, like in Softie, or we have to be the villain, like the dictators and all the other stuff. And I think it kind of made it, for me, it was like, oh, wow, I don't know why the hell I got into this world. But when these audiences get to see themselves, it's incredible to just see how their mind is blown.
I mentioned earlier that Sam produced the film Matabele Land. It's the first feature by Nyasha Kadandara. She profiles Chris, a middle-aged man in Zimbabwe. He has a sprawling family of 17 children by several different partners, and he's trying to build a new relationship. He's haunted by the murder of his father in a massacre over 4 decades ago. Chris is a complicated figure, neither hero nor villain. I asked Sam what motivated him to produce the work of other directors.
Like I mentioned, we're working off a different baseline. And that means when I finished Softie, I was being approached by different filmmakers who are all first-time filmmakers, and they have this incredible stories. And I had to make a choice. I had to decide whether do I just keep making my work, and which is great and helpful, or is there something I have gained from this experience that I can share or find a way to share? And I love working with stories and different types of stories. So it was a conscious decision to work with first-time filmmakers and try to build that base, because there are not that many African producers. The reality of producing in the continent is they have to come to the north. They have to come to the US. So you will always meet the African filmmaker, but they're with a French producer, a German producer, and that's our reality. There's very little we call South-South collaboration. You almost never see that. This film is a first-time filmmaker with a first-time editor. And the film before that I produced, No Simple Way Home, first-time filmmaker. Right now I'm working with a Jordanian filmmaker, first-time filmmaker. And that for me is what's important. Like, we need to build more engagement in the South that sees, because we have a greater understanding of the stories we're trying to tell. We have a greater understanding of the type of the people we are trying to engage, because the films we're making are for the people with the spaces that we're telling these stories. And our our challenge is explaining this to the North.
Yeah.
And being like, hey, we still want to make these films, but we still do need your support. But then it's like, how does this work? Yeah. And that's what we're trying to figure out. And that's why these conversations are important. And to try and figure out, like, we need more. Like, I am not happy to be the only one here.
Yeah.
It's very lonely for me. Like, if I don't know how many of you have met an African filmmaker in your time here. Exactly. Like, we're not.
But was it Sam? Because that doesn't count.
Yeah. That's the thing, is like, we're not many. And that's a very lonely experience. And you can imagine what that does to us. To be like, you're the 2-3 guys at IDFA, who you're the same guys who you're meeting in Berlin and the same guys whom you're meeting at CPH. And I think we need to encourage more of that engagement. We need to encourage more of that level of collaboration that allows both the filmmaker and the producers and the other creative voices like the editors to engage and grow. Because the world that is right now, that's what's going to get us out of all this drama that's taking place, because we need to be together rather than isolated. Mm-hmm. And that's just the reality of life right now.
So let's talk more about Montebello Land. What did you see? What was the first thing you saw of it, and what were the things that you responded to it, and what did it take to get it from that point to its finished place?
Yes. I saw my father. It's not funny, but we laugh about it, that if you ask an African person to be like, how many siblings do you have? They will tell you 2 that I know of. It's because we take it for granted, not take it for granted, like we know our fathers probably have other kids that we're gonna meet at their funeral. And someone's gonna pop out to you and be like, hey, hi, I know you don't know me, but... And it's not like we are dramatic about it. It's like the one for like, hey, good to meet you. Like, it's like, we don't need to have a relationship after this, but I kind of sensed you existed. And I have never seen my father vulnerable. Like, I've never seen my father say, these words, I love you, or even hug my mom. Let me just say that. That's not something I've seen. And here's a man who is open to, on a bare basic level, to be like, I am in love with this woman. That was shock. I was like, huh? And he goes to the whole other level, be like, let me show you all my children. He's like, there's this one, and then there's this one. I was like, huh, you know all your children? Then it's mind-blowing for me as someone from Kenya. And for a moment you think, is it only an experience that I have? And then you talk to someone else, and like, honestly, our team in this film all have incredibly complicated relationships with our fathers. That's 100% return. Like, and I was like, why don't we try and tell a story that tries to understand African masculinity and gives the space not to be like, I forgive you, because that's another journey, but to be like, I understand, And that's what this film is. This film is that opportunity. It provides that space for not only myself, but because a lot of the responses we've been getting about the film is, I want to watch this film with my son and my dad. I want to bring my uncles to watch this film. We had someone from Colombia watching the film and be like, hey, I'd never thought about this about my father, so I'm going to call him. And I was like, wait, okay, cool. But that's what it's about. It's giving that opportunity for African men to be understood in a space where they've not been allowed to be vulnerable. Because a show of vulnerability for us is failure. It's death, literally. Yeah.
So what were you able to do as someone with a few films behind you to help this film realize its full potential?
Sure. so it helped that I had built some level of relationships. So for example, I still films from Montreal, Canada, whom we worked with Softie, Bob Moore. He, off the whim of trust and collaboration, he was like, I do not understand what you're telling me, but I'm game, let's do this. And he kind of came on board very early on, and it kind of gave us a bit of momentum. We got the Sundance, we got a Sundance doc grant, we got Id for Bertha, we got a bunch of collaborators to kind of see us through, but we really struggled to convince people that this was a space for conversation, because again, there's always a defined type of story that is allowed to come out of the continent. So it took us quite a while to get people to understand this is what we're trying to do. And we're honestly super grateful to CPH because they really took a chance on the film. They really took a chance on the film. And it kind of allowed us to believe, we'd be like, okay, there is something here that is worth pushing and worth telling. And now we're very excited to get it out, particularly in the continent.
So I want to talk about the way these films reach audiences in the continent. I mean, you talked about how Softie, even 4 years later, is something that's become part of the vernacular that people make references to it. Well, let me just ask you, with that film, how was that film reaching people? Like these people who are quoting it from TikTok, how did they see it?
Whoa, so Softie was like crazy because we had to convince traditional spaces that a documentary can be shown. I mean, like the theaters and a bunch of other people. And I remember talking to some of the theaters and be like, hey, we have this documentary, it's pretty cool, we think you should show it. And this was still like during COVID, so they were doing
Didn't make it easier.
Yeah, they were doing 50% capacity and they were scared they're gonna shut down. And I think there was a bunch of like big Hollywood films around at the same time. So they were like, we'd rather do these films. And we really try to get them to watch it. And they're like, no, we don't want to do this because we don't know. It's a bit political as well. And everybody's scared of something political in the African space. Eventually, one of the owners of the theater was like, okay, I'm going to try and watch it. I'll watch like 10, 15 minutes and then I'll give you quick feedback. And they watched it. They watched all of it and then called me back and was like, we have to show this. Can we show this? And it ended up being the biggest film in the theater that year.
Wow.
And that kind of created this appetite. And last year I worked on this other film called The Battle for Laikipia that also premiered at Sundance. And it was the same thing. It was like, this film, we're not sure. We don't know how this. And it's one of the biggest films last year in the theaters. And that kind of started making people like, oh, wow, okay, there is something here. There is something to these stories. But over and above that, we negotiate the rights in a certain way that allows us to put these films geo-locked on YouTube in the African continent. And I think, and this is, for a feature film on YouTube, someone's like, I'm not going to sit down and watch 80 minutes. It's like, homie, that's...
So just to clarify here, you're saying you put the film on YouTube for free,
yes,
but only geo-locked to
the continent.
Continent. So if you have a deal with a European TV station, they're okay.
Yeah. So we kind of, because one, most people in the continent do not like to subscribe. The idea of putting your email and then you need a password, they're like, guys, that's too much work. So how can I just watch something? So I'm like, here's 10 minutes on WhatsApp. Just enjoy this one. And then they watch it and then they're like, is there more? And you're like, yeah, here's the link. So that's when they go to YouTube. And then the thing with YouTube is like they don't have to log in. They'll just suffer with the ads, but they'll get to watch it. And the uptake for these films is ridiculous. And over and above that, there's a congregation within different community centers and community markets and all these other spaces, and just kind of plug into already existing watching or viewing spaces. And in doing that, you kind of keep that momentum going. Because the other thing about reaching out to these communities is like, these are versions or type of stories that they're not used to. Because they're used to your BBC film. You have a guy with a nice British voiceover explaining what's going on, and they're like, that's when you say documentary, that's what they think it is. But in this case, just watching like what you watch is like, there's no voiceover. It's just playing out. And that's helping us build audiences. And the thing we also kind of realized and started encouraging other filmmakers is there is no point in having all these films playing in all these festivals that no one gets to see.
Right.
Like, it's one of the saddest things where you have all these beautiful films being made, spend 5, 6, 7 years, really suffered through making them. And then you only get to have 100 people in a theater get to watch in Nairobi or Maputo or any one of these African cities. And that's it. And that's so sad. So is there a way we could just get this stuff out there progressively in all these platforms, in all these spaces, not necessarily to be inclined to like, let's tie it down on this platform or let's put it down in this space. But at the same time, thinking of how can the filmmaker get their money back or get some money back because the unsaid truth is, if we're talking about complex and drying out revenues in the North, imagine how it is for us. Yeah. So it's in trying to encourage the theaters to show this film is one avenue. Putting them on YouTube is another avenue. Breaking them down in pieces, because the other thing is, there's a reason why in a lot of African spaces, there's no culture of sitting down and watching a film for your 1.5 hours, because homie got to go to the farm. So if he's going to the farm, he doesn't have time to sit down for over 30, 40 minutes to watch something. So if you break them in pieces, then, he can watch his 20 minutes and be like, cool, can I watch another 20 tomorrow? And even something as basic as WhatsApp, mind-blowing in terms of how people can engage with content. Yeah.
Your film, Free Money, that came out in 2022 that you co-directed, which is about an experiment of an American NGO with universal basic income. They pick an African village, they pick a village in Kenya, and say, we're going to give universal basic income to all the villagers for, was it 10 years?
Yeah.
And we're going to see how it's like an experiment, and there's a way to look at it as like, wow, this is what a lucky village. They get to be the beneficiaries of this. But as we watch the film, like, we see certain maybe unplanned for tensions that arise out of that, and it becomes more complicated than just this great windfall for the village. That film you were describing to me before the panel started had a different trajectory of reaching audiences. Can you talk about that?
So that film got picked up by. So Free Money is kind of, again, it's following this organization called Give Directly that's trying to revolutionize giving. So they're like, instead of you, what do you call it, giving aid to get people to, do trainings or give them fertilizer or do that thing, just give people money directly. Just send it to their accounts and let them figure out what they want, which is a beautiful idea. It's like giving agency.
Because they were looking at, there's this whole middle culture of other NGOs who, have high-paid employees and who are, taking $1 million, taking a portion of that for themselves, and then trickling down
to the there's a whole culture of it's why in a lot of countries, including Kenya, people have a problem with the UN. There's so many people who get paid a lot of money and live so well, and all in the name of helping the people on the ground.
Like there's a memorable anecdote in Free Money that still lingers with me 3 years later of an NGO that had built homes for people, exactly. but didn't build the roofs. So, anyways, the best intention side of this.
The best intentions, which make a lot of sense, is let's just go to this place, let's give them money, and let them figure out what they want. And it's a monthly, you could say a stipend that meets more or less your minimum kind of wage. It's a living wage that makes sense. On the surface, makes a lot of sense, does a lot of good, and this village is a lot happier because they get money. And we were filming during deep COVID, so they were so much better than so many other people. But the challenge that was there is the choice of picking the village ignored the fact that this village is connected to other villages, and these were all relatives. So when you came and decided you're just giving this one, you've all of a sudden created a schism that wasn't there before. And beyond that one, they are poor people. So what choice do they have in taking this money? It's you're broke. If someone comes and say, I'm going to give you 5,000 euros every month, you're not going to be oh no, let me think about it. Is this good money? Is this bad money? It's that's the thing. And so whenever there's a problem, they're scared as crap to say anything because they're scared that this money is going to be taken away. And the film ends up questioning that idea of agency and the idea of when people decide to essentially play God and be you're the right one, you're the wrong one, you make sense, you don't make sense. And when it came to distribute this film, it ended up being picked up by Netflix Africa. But one of the things we ended up engaging with Netflix and figuring that out is, could we dub the film in the local language and sharing this film with the people in the local language and get them to watch the film? Oh. And they were cool with it. And the film just blew up in that space.
But can I ask you, given what you said a minute ago about there not being as much uptake on subscription sites, so what is the engagement with Netflix in a general population?
It's in kind of defining that, even them understanding that this group of people are never going to have a Netflix subscription. It's never going to happen. You would dream or want them to, but that's not what they're going to do. And that means I will end up making a film about a certain group of people who will never have a chance to watch the film. How is that fair? That makes no sense. So they at least gave us that leeway to allow that film to be available. And when that happened, it allowed for a lot of people to engage with the film and allowed for a lot of people to understand the film.
I want to ask you about some of the organizations and institutions that are starting to emerge for filmmakers in Africa. In Nairobi, there's DocuBox. Can you talk about the significance of that kind of institution building?
So because we're a growing community, we're a small community, but I think like I shared, it's a very lonely community. So what organizations like DocuBox, there's another one called Documentary Africa, Doc-A. These organizations provide spaces and opportunities for people to connect and engage. And it's one of the reasons, like say Nyasha and I met. It was through kind of we just were like, we created like this film therapy group for people to just kind of be like vent and and share their struggles. And in one of those engagements is when she talked to me about the film she was trying to make. And that community really does add a lot of value in growing the art and the work that in things that we are working in. But at the same time, people like DocuBox do have some money that they do give, and same to Documentary Africa. Like it's not a lot, but it's something. It's something that did not exist. And in the last, I've kind of like a concept. We know funding in the global scale is going down in terms of the money that's getting into making films. And in the African continent, I think right now we probably have one grant that's primarily open to African filmmakers. And at the time we were making Softie, there used to be like 6 or 7. And
so it's shrunk.
It's really like disappeared.
Yeah.
And so organizations like DocuBox and Doc-A, they're still the ones who are trying to, put it in the good fight and get you, allow you to access some money, but it's.
I mean, the tragedy or pity here is that we saw this kind of rise of people getting opportunities of growing. I think probably other people taking inspiration, like I could do that.
This. Exactly.
And just as that is happening, the bottom is falling out on resources.
And that's kind of what's happened. And with Trump and the USAID and all this other, actually a really interesting point. So a lot of filmmakers in the continent make their way, nonfiction filmmakers make their way through making nonprofit documentaries. That's kind of how you survive so that you could make this type of stuff. Because this type, making a film 5 years, you're barely getting any money to do it. So you do get some money in filming a malaria project or that kind of thing. And now...
So the demolition of USAID is choked off a lot of that money.
A lot of people have actually quit. They've totally left this trade and they're trying to figure out something else. They're selling their cameras. And it's going. I don't know what that's going to look like in the next few years. But the reality of that in this point is, if you look at how many African documentaries are in circulation right now, it's sad. It's really sad. I think it's maybe less than 5. And that's the thing you're saying is and there was a point, I think 3 or 4 years ago, we're talking about 20, 30, and it's just gone down. And that difference and these things, we need to find ways to mitigate that. And I'm not saying that to be hey, come save us. That's not what I'm saying. Because what we know internally that we need to have our own solutions and we need to figure out our own methods so that we're not as dependent in in the story, because in the stories we tell and the people we're trying to engage. And that's why we're trying to develop and make more stories that have a lot more uptake in the continent and build that level of space and that type of opportunities. But at the same time, we do need some level of engagement that allows us to give credibility to what we're doing. So our film getting into CPH does that. Our film getting into TIFF does that. Our film in all these spaces. But we need to kind of help the programmers and the people in this space to understand that the baselines which we're dealing with have totally shifted and have totally changed. So the quality that we would aspire to attain at certain points is not the same. But we are trying, and we're still pushing, and we're still encouraging, and we still need those new voices. And we can't give up now. We need to keep that door open and allow more of these voices in.
I want to thank Sam Soko for speaking with me. His directing credits include Softie and Free Money. See our show notes for more on those films. I invite you to read our Substack newsletter, Doc Voices, written by Bella Racklin. If you want to advertise to our 45,000 readers, send an email to listen@purenonfiction.net. Thanks to our team, series producer Hannah Nordenswan and web designer Cross Strategy. Our theme music is composed by Andre Williams, and our executive producer is Raphael Nehausen. I'm Tom Powers. Follow us on Instagram and visit our website at purenonfiction.net.